Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in just a minute. Folks, we'll get started in just a minute. If you want to say hi in the chat, please do. Hi, folks. It looks like people are still streaming in, so we'll just give a minute. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the Alliance to End Hunger. And we're here today with colleagues from USDA who have graciously agreed to spend their time with us the next hour talking about child nutrition and giving us some updates. So I am thrilled to introduce Janelle Jack, who's a program analyst in external affairs at FNS USDA, Food and Nutrition Services, and Allison Maurice, who some of you may remember from when she was at the Alliance. She's also a program analyst at External Affairs and FNS at USDA. And we're thrilled to have both of you joining us today. And so they're going to go over the latest changes related to child nutrition programs, in particular, summer EBT, WIC, and school meal food package changes. And then we'll take questions at the end. So please, as we go along, add your questions to the Q&A, and we'll make sure we have time towards the end of the webinar to address them. Thank you. All right, Janelle, I'm turning it over to you.
Hey everyone, I am really excited to be here today, and I just wanted to extend a big thank you to the Alliance to End Hunger for offering USDA time today just to provide you all with important updates to our programs. As Minerva said, I'm Janelle Jack. I'm a program analyst with USDA Food and Nutrition Service, and I work in the External and Governmental Affairs Division. Before we get started, I'll briefly share what's on the agenda for today. So first, I'll provide an update on the recent published final rule that established the latest nutrition standards for school meals. Then I'll transition to updates in the new WIC food package. And then lastly, I'll provide an update on everything we have going on as it relates to summer nutrition programs and what resources are available for our communities to better serve kids and healthy meals while school is out. And like Minerva said, we'll reserve time at the end for any questions on anything that was shared. So let's jump right in. I'll start firstly with a quick background on what got us to this point. And then I'll explain the new school meal standards, and then I'll finish this portion of the presentation with ways that USDA and FNS are here to support successful implementation. Okay, and so to start, this slide provides us with an overview of recent changes to the school meal nutrition requirements. And so in early 2022, we published our transitional standards rule. And so instead of making permanent changes, this rule began a multi-stage approach to kind of strengthen the school meal nutrition requirements. And the purpose of this transitional rule was really to provide immediate relief as schools return to traditional school meal service following the extended use of pandemic waivers. Then, 1 year later, we issued a proposed rule, which sought to improve the school meal nutrition requirements for the long term. And so this proposed rule was based on a comprehensive review of the latest dietary guidelines and an extensive stakeholder engagement, which included, I believe, over 50 listening sessions. And so the final rule that we're discussing today finalizes that February 2023 proposed rule. And it also finalizes certain provisions from a rule that was proposed in 2020. And so I'll make note of those provisions during the presentation as well. And so in addition to the stakeholder feedback that we received through all of those listening sessions that I just mentioned, this rulemaking was also considered and took in over 136,000 comments. And that is a lot of comments, and I'm really thankful that the external affairs team didn't have to go through all of those comments, but we know that our child nutrition folks did. And so we received lots of comments from members of Congress, state agencies, the food industry, advocacy groups, and of course, child nutrition professionals with firsthand experience operating our programs. And so in the rule itself, you'll find a detailed overview of the specific feedback provided in public comments and our responses. And at a high level, many of the comments noted the importance of providing adequate lead time for schools and students to adjust to meal pattern changes. Comments also generally recommended that USDA consider the types of foods students consume outside of school while when making those changes. And then lastly, many of the comments kind of emphasize the benefit of having long-term certainty on the meal pattern requirements. So now we'll jump into the nutrition standards in the final rule. And it is really important, and I want to continue to emphasize this, that while some new options are available in the next school year, no menu changes will be required until school year 2025-2026 at the earliest. And this also applies to other child nutrition programs. And so like we mentioned about the comment process, child nutrition professionals let us know that they really would need time to successfully implement these changes. And so we listened, and their feedback is reflected in the implementation dates for this final rule. So I'll start with the added sugar limits for school meals. And so this final rule includes a two-step approach for reducing added sugars. So first, the rule establishes that added sugar limits for breakfast cereal, yogurt, flavored milk in school meals. And so these limits must be implemented by school year 2025-2026. 2 school years later, the rule implements a weekly added sugars limit for school lunch and breakfast. And I'd like to highlight one important change we made in response to feedback from the child nutrition professionals, industry, and other partners. And that's that the proposed rule included a limit on grain-based desserts, such as breakfast bars and toaster pastries at breakfast. However, public comments raised concerns about the potential negative impact of these grab-and-go breakfasts, which often include products that were traditionally categorized as grain-based desserts. So we took this feedback seriously and did not finalize the proposed grain-based dessert limit for school breakfast. However, we plan to provide technical assistance to ensure that schools have the resources that they need to reduce added sugars at breakfast, including meeting the weekly added sugars limit at breakfast upon implementation. And so we will also try to include guidance to help schools identify grains that are lower in added sugars and that are grab-and-go friendly. So to support alignment across programs, the rule also includes a few minor changes to the Child and Adult Care Food Program, also known as CACFP. So most notably, the rule updates the existing total sugar limits for breakfast cereals and yogurts in the CACFP to include added sugar limits. And so these updated limits for the CACFP program align with the new limits established in the school meal programs. And so the added sugar limits for breakfast cereal and yogurt established in this rule also align with the limits in the WIC food package rule. So under this final rule, the CACFP operators will be able to use any state's WIC list to identify breakfast cereals and yogurts that meet the added sugar limits. So now onto the flavored milk provision. Under this final rule, schools may continue to offer fat-free and low-fat milk, flavored and unflavored, to K through 12 students at lunch and breakfast. The proposed rule included an option that would have limited children in only grades K through 8 to unflavored milk varieties. And so USDA opted not to finalize this alternative. The decision to continue to allow flavored, fat-free, and low-fat milk reflects public comments, which noted that flavored milk is preferred by some children and can help to improve children's milk consumption and reduce waste. The final rule is also consistent with the Appropriations Act passed by Congress and signed into law by the President in March 2024. And so within that act, it required that USDA continue to allow all K through 12 schools to offer fat-free and low-fat milk, flavored and unflavored, which this rule continues to do so. And in the CACFP and special milk program operators may continue to serve flavored milk, fat-free and low-fat, to participants 6 years of age or older. And this was also part of the Appropriations Act. And as a reminder, flavored milk offered in the school meals will need to meet the product-based added sugars limit by school year 2025-2026. And so flavored milk processors have already made really great strides in reducing added sugars in flavored milk since their announcing of the healthy school milk commitment last April. And so that commitment will continue to support the implementation of the product-based added sugar limits for flavored milk and will help schools to reduce added sugars in their meals. And just to be clear, the added sugars limit for flavor milk only applies to school meals. It doesn't apply to CACFP and the special milk program. And so now I'll jump into the whole grain requirements in school meals. And so the final rule maintains the current requirement that at least 80% of the weekly grains offered in school meals must be whole grain rich. And so any remaining grains offered must be enriched. And so school nutrition professionals will not need to make any changes to their menus under this requirement. The final rule reflects, like I've said before, the feedback from the public comments that we received. And those comments emphasize the importance of offering meals that meet local and cultural preferences by occasionally allowing schools to offer enriched grains. The proposed rule also included an alternative that would have required schools to implement the whole grain rich requirement as a days per week model instead of a percentage. And so we opted not to finalize this alternative based on public comments that noted that the current requirement works well for schools and allows flexibility to plan menus that students enjoy. Now onto the sodium requirements. And this change is also taking into consideration the range of input that we got from stakeholders. And so based on that input, instead of making several more aggressive reductions to sodium as was proposed, the final rule makes one single achievable reduction to sodium levels in school meals. And so for the next 3 school years through school year 2026-2027, the final rule maintains the current sodium limits. The final rule will then reduce the school lunch sodium limit by 15% and the school breakfast sodium limit by 10%. And this reduction is required by school year 2027-28. And so this gives schools 3 years to gradually reduce sodium, responding to lots of schools that ask for plenty of time to reduce this sodium in school meals. And like I said before, this final rule is also consistent with the Appropriations Act, which requires USDA to maintain the current sodium limits through school year 2026-2027, and then requires that USDA may not reduce sodium to limits lower than sodium target 2 that was initially set in 2020, in 2012. And so the sodium limits that schools will implement in school year 27-28 are consistent with the levels previously referred to as target 2. Sodium target 2 was widely supported when finalized by the previous administration in 2018. And we know that some schools were already meeting and making progress towards that target in earlier school years. And so as the broader US food supply starts to contain less sodium, thanks to the FDA's voluntary sodium reduction effort, the meals kids eat outside of school will better reflect the nourishing meals that they also get in school. So this provision also provides more menu planning flexibility, and it doesn't require schools to make any changes, and will be available to schools next school year. Under the current school breakfast meal pattern, schools are required to offer grains every day at breakfast. And so schools can offer meats and meat alternates in place of grains, but only after meeting the minimum grains requirement each day. The final rule removes the minimum grains requirement, making it easier for schools to offer protein-rich foods like eggs, cheese, and yogurt at breakfast. And so schools may continue to offer grains, and they can choose to offer meats and meat alternatives, or can offer a combination of both, as you see in the image in the slide. So the next two provisions were developed in response to feedback that USDA received during listening sessions with tribal communities. And so first, the rule will allow tribally operated schools operated by the Bureau of Indian Education, and also schools serving primarily American Indian or Alaska Native children to serve vegetables to meet the grains requirement. And so this change reflects feedback that USDA received from Indigenous nutritionists who requested that vegetables be allowed as a grain substitute to better meet the nutritional needs of Indigenous children. And so this option is also going to be available to CACFP and SFSP operators that primarily serve American Indian or Alaska Native participants. And in addition, the rule will include in regulation that traditional Indigenous foods may be served in reimbursable school meals. So the intent of this change is really to emphasize USDA's support for integrating traditional Indigenous foods into the school meal programs. And while many traditional Indigenous foods may already be served under existing guidance, we expect that this regulatory change will help to address the perception that traditional foods are not creditable and support local efforts to incorporate traditional Indigenous foods into school meals. And the final rule includes several other meal pattern changes, many of which provide schools with more flexibility and options compared to the current requirements. And as noted on the slide, the provisions marked with an asterisk proposed in the 2020 rule that I mentioned. And so, for example, one change removes a crediting limit for nuts and seeds offered in meals, providing more flexibility to offer nuts and seeds in child nutrition meals. Another change provides flexibility for crediting beans, peas, and lentils at lunch, which some public comments suggested could better support plant-based entrees such as bean burritos or chickpea wraps. And then this slide further highlights a few more administrative and operational changes in the rule, which includes a few additional changes related to the Buy American requirements, such as documentation requirements. And as noted on the slide with asterisks, 2 of these changes were proposed in the 2020 rule. Okay, so now we'll jump into a little bit of the changes in the rule related to program operations and administration. So I'll start with the Buy American requirements. And so the final rule codifies the limited exceptions when schools can purchase non-domestic foods. And these exceptions apply only when a product is listed on the federal acquisitions regulations, non-available articles list, and or is not produced or manufactured in the US in sufficient or reasonably available quantities of a satisfactory quality, or if competitive bids reveal the cost of a US product are significantly higher than a non-domestic product. And so the addition of the readily available list of exempt items responds to public comments which mention that such a list would help to reduce the administrative burden of documenting these exceptions. And the final rule also gradually phases in a 5% cap on non-domestic food purchases. And so in instituting this cap, USDA is balancing the intent of the Buy American provision to support American farmers and ranchers, while also recognizing that there are times when purchasing domestic foods is not practical for schools. And so the phased-in approach responds to public comments that suggested the 5% cap is too restrictive under current procurement conditions. And so a study conducted by USDA found an average of 8.5% of school food purchases are non-domestic, which makes this a more gradual approach that's attainable for schools. And so in recognition of these public comments, the final rule also gives state agencies discretion to allow an accommodation for temporary relief from this requirement, and also additional guidance on the accommodation is forthcoming. And so lastly on this slide, I'll highlight another change related to procurement. And so the final rule expands on the geographic preference options by allowing child nutrition program operators to use locally grown, locally raised, or locally caught as procurement specifications for unprocessed, minimally processed food items and child nutrition programs. And so these procurement specifications are written description of the product or service that the vendor must meet to be considered responsive and responsible. And so this change, which was widely supported by public comments, may help support the purchase of local foods by school nutrition program operators, and may also ease procurement challenges for operators interested in sourcing local foods. And so before wrapping up the school meal standards update, I'd just like to highlight a few actions that USDA is taking to support the implementation of the final rule and to support the child nutrition programs in general. And so we've been hosting different webinars just like this one with our state agencies, with child nutrition professionals, and many other partners, just to provide them with a detailed overview of the rule. We also have a final rule webpage with numerous resources, including infographics, frequently asked questions, and more, where anyone can go to find information about that rule. And so we'll also be releasing policy guidance in the near term and in the months ahead to support this gradual implementation of the rule. And so feel free to scan that QR code to get access to the site more directly. So now we'll transition away from the from child nutrition into the WIC food package. And so on November 21st, 2022, the USDA published a proposed rule to revise the regulations governing the WIC food packages. And these revisions reflect recommendations that the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, also known as NASEM, made as a part of its independent scientific review. And the revisions also align with the current nutrition science, including the 2020 to 2025 dietary guidelines for Americans, and also the FDA and EPA's joint advice about eating fish. And so the revised food package is aiming to collectively advance nutrition security and equity, and also consider the program administration to support a nutritious, balanced diet while offering participants more choices, more balance, more flexibility, and more support. So the changes provide more choices to ensure that participants have access to essential nutrients that support healthy growth and development by increasing access to a variety of fresh fruits and vegetables through the cash value benefit, by offering more forms of fruits and vegetables, and by adding more milk substitutions. The changes also provide more balance to address key nutritional needs and support healthy dietary patterns by adding canned fish to more food packages, by recalibrating some of the juice amounts, providing more balanced milk amounts, updating nutrient requirements for milk and milk substitutes, and also encouraging whole grain cereals. So the changes have also increased more flexibility to accommodate for personal and cultural food preferences and special dietary needs by expanding the whole grain options, also providing more substitution options for milk, eggs, and peanut butter, and also allowing a bit more variety in package sizes. And finally, the changes provide more support for individual breastfeeding goals and to help establish and sustain long-term breastfeeding by creating a separate and enhanced food package specifically for those who are partially breastfeeding, and adding flexibility to formula amounts provided for partially breastfed infants. And so you'll see the benefit of more nutrients weaved throughout the final changes to each food category. And so I'll begin to highlight some of those changes now, starting with the fruits and vegetables. So through the revised WIC food package, WIC participants will have better access to a variety of key nutrients found in fruits and vegetables. And we're encouraging fruit and vegetable consumption by increasing the cash value benefit, or CVB amounts. And so the final changes reset the regulatory baseline amounts, and Congress temporarily increased the CVB annually since 2021. But with these final set of changes, the program rules will now reflect the 2022 CVB amounts. And so these final changes also include an inflation markup to keep pace with food costs. And so this means that in fiscal year 2024 amounts, it means that those fiscal year 2024 amounts, which WIC state agencies have already implemented, are still applicable. And so the increased baseline amounts in regulation together with the annual inflation increase provide participants with the opportunity to make more choices and consider a wider variety of fruits and vegetables that accommodate their cultural and other food preferences. And so participants will have more variety with access to more forms and types of fruits and vegetables. And so they can use their cash value benefit to buy fresh herbs, which are popular in many recipes and many cultures, and can enhance the flavor of food as a strategy to sort of reduce the added sugars, saturated fat, and sodium, as well as to potentially increase the consumption of other vegetables. And so larger pack sizes are now a new option that can make it easier and also more convenient for participants to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables. And in addition to fresh fruits and vegetables, WIC state agencies must offer at least one other form, so that can be canned, dried, or frozen, And so this requirement promotes equity by ensuring that all participants have access to a variety of options, including non-perishable choices that meet their needs. And so, as I mentioned before, we're recalibrating the juice amounts across participant categories and also allowing for a cash value benefit substitution for better alignment with the current nutritional science. And moving on to dairy, WIC participants will continue to have access to wholesome dairy products, including cow's milk, which includes important nutrients. But we strengthened nutrient standards as well for milk and milk substitutions to align with current nutritional science and also target participants' specific nutrient needs. And so some of the final changes include adding an added versus total sugars limit to better align with the current dietary guidance. We also removed cheese as a separate food category for fully breastfeeding participants to reduce saturated fat. And then for fully breastfeeding individuals, like other participants, they can still receive cheese as a partial substitute for milk. There's also been an establishment of a calcium requirement for tofu and a vitamin D requirement for yogurt to ensure that participants who substitute cow's milk are provided the same priority nutrients in similar amounts relative to dairy milk. And in addition to strengthening nutrient standards, we're providing more substitute options for milk, like increasing access to yogurt and non-dairy substitutions, also providing more flexibility and variety, and as I mentioned earlier, to better accommodate some of the participants' special dietary needs and cultural eating patterns. So now turning to grains, we are encouraging participants to eat more whole grains by strengthening the whole grain standards and providing more variety. And so this is based off of the dietary guidelines that noted that about 98% of Americans don't meet the recommendations for whole grain intake, and that about 74% of Americans exceed the limits for refined grains and fiber, which is traditionally found in whole grains. And this is a nutrient for public health concerns since low intakes are associated with health concerns. And so that expansion of whole grain options is also to better support participants' cultural food preferences. And so WIC state agencies are best positioned to talk with their families to identify the whole grain options that their participants prefer. Therefore, states can now authorize a much more expansive list of whole grain products and can also authorize additional whole grain options not listed in the rule, so long as they don't include added fats, sugars, salt, or oil. And like I mentioned a little bit earlier, we're adding a bit more flexibility to egg substitutes to better meet participants' needs and to also promote equity by ensuring access to a variety of options, including non-perishable choices. So participants can now substitute peanut butter or legumes, dried or canned, for 1 dozen eggs. And so requiring states to authorize canned legumes, offering participants a time-saving, convenient way to consume beans. And additionally, states may authorize 1 pound of tofu and nut or seed butters as substitutes for eggs. We received a broad support for adding a variety of canned fish to more food packages, with many comments citing the benefits of fish as a healthy diet. And so in addition, to reduce participant confusion when selecting foods at the store and to also ease administrative burden, state agencies can offer all WIC-eligible canned fish varieties. So that includes salmon, sardines, Atlantic mackerel, chub mackerel, and light tuna to children and WIC participants. We also received a lot of comments in support allowing nut and seed butters as a substitute for peanut butter, noting that these products are better to accommodate those that have peanut allergies. And so the final changes allow for the WIC state agencies to authorize nut and seed butters that provide a comparable nutritional value to peanut butter. And so this substitution will be extended to participants through individual tailoring to accommodate their special dietary needs, their cultural practices, or just their personal preferences. So we're just going to take a look now into the final changes for infant food packages, which encourages healthy dietary habits at an early age by expanding access to fresh fruits and vegetables and providing more balanced amounts of other infant foods. So with the revised cash value benefit, parents and caretakers can introduce infants to a wider variety of texture fruits and vegetables at an earlier age. And so the current dietary guidance notes that exposure to a variety of different types of food is really important in early life to kind of better develop a child's interest and willingness to eat food and enjoy a variety of foods. And this baby eating the dragon fruit is my favorite. She's so cute. And then finally, we recognize that breastfeeding is not an all or nothing choice. And so we created a separate partially breastfeeding food package to better support the participants' choice to breastfeed for as much or as long as they choose. And so the changes for partially breastfeeding participants include a greater CVB and canned fish amounts to support their higher caloric needs. And so in addition, we're helping moms reach their breastfeeding goals through tailored issuance of infant formula. And so during their first month, partially and mostly breastfed infants can now receive up to 364 fluid ounces and tailored issuance of formula in the first month, and nutrition and breastfeeding education and support from WIC staff not only maximizes the potential for participants to achieve their breastfeeding goals, but it also helps to achieve successful partial breastfeeding when exclusive breastfeeding is not possible or desired. And so now that you know more about the changes in the food package, this slide just shows about the implementation steps. And so we're requiring that changes be made by April 2026, and that for all of the provisions with two exceptions. There's a 60-day implementation timeline, which will be June 17th of this year for the revised CVB amounts for all children and women participants, and then a 36-month implementation timeline for the vitamin D requirement to yogurt, which will be in April 2027. And so we know that WIC helps to improve the lives of nearly 7 million participants each year. And so we're really confident that these changes in the food package will continue to result in meaningful, long-lasting impacts on the lives of our participants. And so feel free to scan this QR code or visit fns.usda.gov to learn more about the revisions to the WIC food packages. And there you can also access the final rule there, which is published in the Federal Register. And also on the site, we have Q&As and also a detailed side-by-side comparison of the current, proposed, and also revised standards. So lastly, but not least, we're finally going to turn to our summer nutrition programs for kids. And so first, I would like to share with you that we're using new branding for our summer nutrition programs, which is now called the Summer Sun programs. And so as I give my presentation, you may see that I refer to our new branding, but also mention what the program was called before the rebrand. And so I'll start off by continuing to reiterate that FNS is committed to supporting children year-round through its nutrition assistance programs, because we know that children need consistent access to healthy foods in order to grow, learn, and thrive. And so we know that school break allows school-age children time to rest and recharge. We also know, as someone that was a former teacher, I also know that summer break allows for teachers to rest and recharge, and that this summer break kind of continues to reinforce something that's important for mental and physical health, that break. And so unfortunately, we have noticed that food insecurity increases for children when schools are closed for summer recess. And so when we know that 30 million children participate and rely on USDA's school breakfast and lunch programs, we know that when schools are closed, that kids lose access to these nutritious meals. And despite our best efforts to address summer hunger, we know that millions of children are missing out on receiving the nutrition that they need. So let's just jump into some of the traditional tools that we've used in the past to feed kids during the summer and where we have an opportunity to make a difference. So traditional summer meals have provided healthy meals at no cost to low-income students and teens for a long time, and are vital to ensuring that kids have access to healthy meals and enrichment activities in the summer. So we know that summer meal sites operated by schools, local government, community groups, faith-based organizations, and others are not only critical for addressing summer hunger, but they provide those enrichment activities that kind of support that summer learning and physical activities. And so these sites are still very vital to the families that they serve. And so if you have a great summer meal program in your community or are thinking of supporting a new summer meal program, thank you, because we really do appreciate the great work. And also just the plug that there's always a need for more sponsors, so that more summer meal sites are available to families and locations that are convenient for them. And you can definitely find more information about becoming a sponsor at fns.usda.gov. And so I just spoke a little bit about the traditional sites, but we know historically that those traditional sites have not been able to meet all of the children that need support. And so gathering groups of children is not feasible everywhere or for every family every day. And so in some rural areas, families lack that transportation to get to those sites. And it also can be a struggle to find and maintain staff to provide the reliable meal service to families. And it's because of this and other barriers historically that only about 1 in 6 children who are eligible for free and reduced price meals are served by traditional summer meal sites. And so now we have 3 ways to address summer hunger. One is our traditional summer meal sites, or sun meals, as we're calling it now. We also have pickup or delivery meals specifically for rural areas that do not have access to a congregate site. And we're calling that now Sun Meals to Go. And then lastly, a new program to provide summer grocery benefits, formerly known as summer EBT, but now we're calling it SunBucks. And so we're really glad that Congress took bipartisan action in 2022 to expand the tools with the non-congregate option and summer EBT, because we really think that it'll be a game changer for kids and families during the summer. And so during the pandemic, we witnessed the true difference of providing take-home meals and providing home delivery made for low-income rural families living in areas where traditional meal programs have left gaps. And so some of you on this call may have been integral to that process and success. And so I just want to extend a thank you on behalf of FNS. And so this non-congregate option addresses those challenges like the lack of transportation, convenient site locations, funds and staff to support summer meal programs in hard-to-reach rural areas. This new option can improve equitable access to nutritious food, and it seeks to benefit up to 8 million children in rural America. And starting this summer, USDA is pleased to announce that 37 states, DC, and all the territories and 3 tribes will be offering sunbucks to families and eligible children. And so this is the first time that USDA has stood up a brand new program in 40 years. And so that really makes this something remarkable. And within the Sunbucks program, that means that during the summer, families will receive $120 worth of food benefits for each eligible child. And so they can use these benefits to buy groceries, similar to how SNAP benefits are used. And I really want to stress this point that these food dollars are in addition to, not instead of, nutritious summer meals that children receive through traditional in-person options or grab-and-go options. And so the tools that we have in our toolbox are really designed to complement one another and not to be in competition. And so who is eligible for Sunbucks? So all school-age children whose households participate in other nutrition assistance programs, and also children who attend a school that offers the National School Lunch or breakfast program, and their household income meets the requirements for free or reduced price school meals. And so each state or implementing area will be unique in the application. And so we actually have a Sunbucks website with lots of information. And so most kids will be automatically enrolled. So make sure if you have any clients, that their addresses are up to date, and others will have to fill out an application. And during the week of May 20th, USDA launched a public awareness campaign site that will help direct people to their state implementing agency website to help find more information about applications. And so we really are thrilled at the prospect of what we can all accomplish together, and meaning that we're working together to kind of seize this opportunity to fight summer hunger. And so I know I've already said thank you throughout this presentation, but I do want to say thank you again to all of you that work to help feed kids during the summertime, as well as your work that you do to feed kids during the school year. And so we know at USDA that the work would not be possible without all of you. And so I hope that you continue to see USDA at the national office and all of our regional offices as a continued partner. And so now I know we have about 13 minutes left. I'll open it up for questions. And so I look forward to answering any questions that you all may have.
That was incredibly informative, and folks, please put your questions in the Q&A so we can address them. And I do want to also extend my thanks from the Alliance to End Hunger to all of our partners, because you all help to advocate for, increasing the fruit and vegetable benefit and WIC, and we're so thrilled that that's now made permanent. Also for increasing flexibility for cultural options in all the federal nutrition programs, as well as we've been advocating for a non-congregate option for summer meals for about a decade. So really, really, just want to extend the thanks to our network and all of the work that you guys have done to make some of these things a reality. It's been a long road, and it's really wonderful to see these changes. So I will ask the first question. I'd love more information on just sort of the non-congregate option or summer meals to go. And I know it's not available everywhere, but can you talk about what areas that option is available in?
So we actually have a webpage where we have our summer meals, our non-congregate site finder. And so there you can type in, I believe you can type in a zip code, and you can find the different areas that are where those meals are available. And so that kind of like showcases those rural pockets that were chosen to kind of like have those sites. And also as folks feel like if they're able to sponsor a site, those are also where those sites are located as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And let me just,
Oh, and then
I think,
I think Allison
Yeah,
wants to add a little bit.
yeah,
go ahead, Allison.
I'll just quickly add that I just want to make sure folks understand, we get the information from the state agency, so our map might not always be the most up to date. So it's probably better to always check in with your state agency to see if they have the most recent. And we're also trying to enhance our summer site finder. We do have some meal to go sites identified on the map. However, for home delivery, we haven't quite figured out how to show that yet because there isn't actually a site for that. So that is a piece of data that's not fully in the map yet, but we're learning and we're going to hopefully make that addition in future years.
Questions? Just go ahead and type them in the Q&A or the chat if you're having trouble finding the Q&A. Well, I could just keep going asking questions. But I did want to, one, kudos on the summer EBT. We do know that not all states are participating, although I think you said 38 states and territories. So that's wonderful news. What can advocates do on the ground where states haven't opted in yet, to help, make this happen in their states?
So one recommendation I can think of, and Allison, feel free to jump in, would just be to continue to reach out to those elected officials that are making the decision about whether they want to opt in. We know that there are some states that have talked about the fact that they haven't opted in because of budget, or also just because of the climate in their state politically, where they might not be in benefit of the programs. So I would encourage you to continue to use your voice, where it's like contacting those folks, those members, and trying to prioritize this as something that's important in the budget. And just like highlighting the impact that it's had in other states and the impact that it can have in communities in those states that don't currently have it. And Allison, is there anything else that you can think of?
No, I think you've summed it up. Yeah, I was just going to reiterate share the stories of the impact that summer EBT has. We're really looking forward to seeing what happens this summer. So yeah, lift it up and keep celebrating it.
Thank you. And we have a question from Ozma, which I'll read in a second, but folks, you can also raise your hands and I can unmute you. But let's go to Ozma's question at Ifanka. Can you elaborate a little bit on USDA's efforts in addressing religious and cultural dietary needs for school lunches and summer feeding programs, such as resources that may be available?
So I know that based on some of the comments that we've gotten, that we've incorporated just like the importance of including culturally relevant and traditional food items. I'm blanking right now on what we've done as it relates to halal and kosher. But I can definitely look that up. And unless, Allison, if you have that off the top of your mind, I can look that up and kind of get back to you on that question.
Yeah, I think we can definitely explore, double checking our website and see what we already have available. But I think one of the intent of the school meal final rule in particular, with those added flexibilities, are really looking at that. And then just to know that this is something that we are really exploring at USDA. And I am trying to quickly find a link. We have this new kind of well, it's not new, but it's reinvigorated clearinghouse of school meal recipes that anyone can actually submit recipes for. And so our hope is to continue to build out more and more of those resources as the implementation process moves forward. So I'm going to try to dig up that link right now for everyone.
Okay, and we'll put that in the chat if we find it.
We're also getting some comments. Love the expansion of the benefits for summer months for kids. Will help parents with the increased cost of food burden with kids at home. Thank you so much for that comments. All right, so if there are no other questions, we'll start to wrap up. But I do want to make sure I'm not missing any questions, and I'll double check that no one has their hand raised. But we certainly, appreciate all of you. And Allison, thank you for sharing that last site. And thank you for dropping all of the links in the chat. We'll definitely share those out. We will also share out the slides for this and the recording. We really appreciate your time today, and really just appreciate the partnership with USDA in general. We'll be sharing out this information and getting in touch with any additional questions as they come up.
And I just wanted to say thank you again. And I just put on the last slide that if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the External Affairs team. And that email address is fns.external.affairs@usda.gov. And feel free to reach out if you have any conferences, any meetings, or any events or things that you think might be of interest for USDA to attend or support, or if you'd like a more detailed kind of like overview for your specific organization as well. And Allison, do you have anything else that you want to add, or are you good to go?
No, I think you did a great job summing up a lot of information today, Janelle. Yeah. I think just one thing I'll say, summer EBT or Sunbucks, we're really excited about the implementation, but it is going to be an all hands on deck, making sure that families understand who needs to apply, who doesn't need to apply. And so if you all can be partners in helping educate your community partners and just getting the word out about summer EBT or Sunbucks, we would be eternally grateful. And we have a lot of materials on our new website and a really sweet video that like warms my heart every time I see it. So anyway, just please let us know if you need any assistance in getting the word out about Sunbucks, because it is unfortunately a little complicated on the actual, application versus who's automatically enrolled. So we could really use the help, getting that word out and learning what kind of messages work and what kind of messages don't. So always open to feedback. And I'm remiss, we'll make sure we send it to Minerva in the follow-up, but we do actually have a summer EBT outreach toolkit that we've developed for our state agencies and partners. So there's just a ton of materials out there to help with the language and so forth on how to explain the program. So anyway, thank you again so much for having us, and we really appreciate your time.
Thank you again. Have a wonderful day, everyone.